Well, good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's Business Success Series presented by Manulife. And this is Get to Know You, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region and the impact on the community. My name is Ian McLean and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we do get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's virtual event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity, regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you will join us in fostering a positive environment here today that is a safe and welcoming space for all. We know that there is more that we can do, and we are committed to listening, learning, and growing as we go. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our sponsors and partners, and so a special thank you today to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife. Our platinum sponsor for the series is the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region. These organizations and many others are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a few quick reminders. Please ensure your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have a tech-related question, please comment in the chat section and a representative of the Chamber team will get back to you in just a moment. If you have a question for today's speakers, they will be gathered throughout the session, and our speakers will do their best to answer them as many questions as possible following their presentation and question and answer session we're having. And all attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation, and it's also made available on the Greater KW Chamber website. I now have the privilege of introducing today's guests, Tracy Hare-Connell, Dr. Ernest Osei, and Tara Bedard. Tracy has 20 plus years of hands-on experience in executive coaching, organizational consulting, and HR leadership across both public and private sector organizations. She has extensive experience helping organizations proactively plan and develop strategy while assessing readiness and supporting the human side of organizational and systems-focused change. She also brings a depth and breadth of experience supporting organizations to develop and strengthen strategic, operational, and organizational capabilities through leadership development and coaching. Leveraging her experience in the technology sector, Tracy has married an understanding of organizations and people with a deep understanding of technology and business process to lead the way through design and implementation of numerous operational and organizational initiatives. As an active community member, Tracy is the incoming chair of the Immigration Partnership Council for 22 to 24 and past president and advisor to the Rotary Club of Kitchener. Dr. Ernest Osei was born in Ghana and completed his B.S.S degree at the University of Science and Technology in Ghana. He first came to Canada in 1989 to study for his master's degree in health and radiation physics at McMaster University. He completed his PhD in medical physics at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne in the United Kingdom. He returned to Canada with his wife and 3 children in 2000 and now is a resident in Kitchener. Dr. Osei is currently the Director of Medical Physics Department of Grand River Cancer Center at Grand River Hospital, where he heads a team to ensure cancer patients in our community receive the best radiotherapy care close to home. He holds 2 adjunct professor positions at the University of Waterloo and associate professorship at the University of Guelph. He actively employs and provides students with learning opportunities in medical physics, teaches medical physics courses at the University of Waterloo, and actively involved in cancer research. Dr. Osei gives back to the Waterloo Region community through volunteer work in the Waterloo Region Immigration Partnership as a council member, and also as the program coordinator and vice chairman of the Centerville Chicopee Community Association. And last but certainly not least, Tara Bedard is the executive director of the Immigration Partnership, where she leads collaborative strategies, engagement, and advocacy to ensure that all immigrants in Waterloo Region are able to reach their full potential and contribute to a thriving community for everyone. Previously, she spent nearly 15 years as a senior leader in a European public interest law organization focused on equity, non-discrimination, and development of social and human rights law and policy with the European Union, the United Nations, the Council of Europe, OSCE, and national governments. So I want to thank them all for joining us today. And maybe we just as we get right into this, I wanted to maybe start with Tracy. We've had a long connection at the Chamber with the Immigration Partnership and its predecessor, which I think was founded along with the Chamber, which was the Waterloo Region Immigrant Employment Network. But Tracy, why don't you tell us about the partnership and its history? Because it is interconnected with what we want to do as a community.
For sure, Ian. Happy to comment without sort of going into what could be a bit of a history lesson, but hopefully an interesting history lesson. Indeed, you mentioned Ryan, W-R-I-E-N, and Ryan was, as you said, the Waterloo Region Immigration Employment Network. It was started about 2006. And in 2006, there were a group of well-meaning and inspired individuals who felt that it was important, as we had newcomers and immigrants settling in our community, it was important for us to, as a community, also then sort of seek to support and provide supports for employment. And so Ryan really sort of did some of the legwork to sort of found the beginnings of what ultimately over time, probably around 2009, 2010, there was an evolution to what was called a LIP, a local immigration partnership. And that local immigration partnership was now not just focused on employment, but rather focused on some of the other things that were necessary in order for immigrants and newcomers to succeed again in the community. We know that we have a significant proportion of newcomers and immigrants, not just through sort of our educational institutions, but people coming to our country as either refugees or as professionals. And so again, this interested body that evolved over that time was still interested in sort of making people successful and trying to help them find success. This is about, to this day, and even then, helping people reach their full potential. And to create a thriving and successful community for all of us in the end. This is really about the whole of the community. The chart that you see in front of you really sort of speaks to that in some respects. So the broader community is really the feed for all of this. Sort of it sits at the bottom, but it really is the most important piece of the puzzle. We have, yes, a staff, and Tara sort of fits into that mold, and we've got some other staff that support us. They're the backbone of the Immigration Partnership itself. But we also have these steering groups. You'll hear the words settle, work, and belong. If we think about the work of Ryan, it was really focused on that work piece, but settle and belong are some of those expanded interests that the Immigration Partnership now focuses heavily around. And then there's a council, and that council is what I've sort of stepped into the chair role of. That council is a body that provides oversight, that isn't necessarily doing the sleeves rolled up work, but rather is perhaps lobbying government, helping create policy, listening to ultimately the voices of our steering groups, and determining how we can move levers or break down barriers or create those successful environments. So to this day, the Immigration Partnership itself has existed since that 2006 timeframe. So that's a significant number of years. We'll talk hopefully a little bit about some of the successes and actions of our efforts and what some of the challenges are today as well. But that settle, work, and belong pillar are still alive and very much well. And to this day, in this moment, we're an immigration partnership collectively. We're hosted by the Region of Waterloo, and funded by, principally funded by Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. So that's where some of our dollars and cents come from, so that we can have the good staff that ultimately sort of keep us as volunteers and community volunteers, many of us, straight and professional in the work that we do. So that's a little bit about the IP.
Yeah.
So I'll use that acronym. Perhaps you might hear that. So immigration partnership. And I think finally, Ian, I'll say we're not the only immigration partnership in Canada. There are many others like us. We learn from the other immigration partnerships across Canada. We are ideally also a model for many immigration partnerships across Canada as well. And like the good, smart communities that we are in Kitchener-Waterloo, we like to be leaders. And I think to some extent, we feel that we have a responsibility to lead in some respects and be innovative and successful in the work that we do around IP. So we're not the only ones, but our work is shared by others in other communities as well.
I think it's important, and I'm going to go to, before I'm going to come back to Ernest, but I had a question for Tara. I think it's important to set that context. We are a community-based collective. It's actually not an organization. The Region of Waterloo, are Tara and her staff are employees of the Region of Waterloo. The chamber is one of the ways that the funding comes as a community partner. But there's a lot of community volunteers like Ernest. I serve on the working group. I think one of the pieces is that this truly is a community initiative. And I think it's important that we recognize that. But for Tara, one of the pieces that sometimes we're aware of, but we want to, is that we're seen now as leaders in assisting refugees, immigrants, newcomers to the community, breaking down the barriers that Tracy talked about. But we don't actually do program delivery. And I think the way I think we describe it is that we're a catalyst of bringing, as Tracy talked about, who are the people we need to talk to break down barriers, get investment, private sector support, regulations, legislation. Why don't you talk a little bit about that role? Because I think it is important that when we discuss this, is that we try and bring the resources and the people and the organizations to bear that can actually make a difference. But I think it's important to kind of set up this conversation that people know what we do or what you do, and the staff who do it so well actually do, and then our other partners that do the program delivery.
Sure. So just to elaborate a little bit further on some of the points that Tracy made, the immigration partnership, I mean, it's in the name. It's a partnership initiative. And so we don't exist independently as an organization, and we don't provide services to any individuals in our community. We are really working organization to organization in Waterloo Region, people, organizations, businesses who have all come together around the idea of supporting immigrant success in our community because it's good for everybody. And so we are an initiative that brings together and creates space for immigrant service organizations, other community service organizations in the nonprofit sector. Independent businesses and employers across the region are engaged in the work that we are doing. We have representatives from all of our area municipalities who are engaged in our work, from our post-secondary institutions, ethnocultural groups across Waterloo Region, and just ordinary residents who don't have any kind of an organizational affiliation, who have an interest in the success of this work because they recognize the benefits to the broader community. And so what we are really is a place of coming together of organizations and business who sit in many, many different places, who see the value of immigration being successful in our community, for this community to be attractive to immigrants, and to be a place where they see themselves settling and are able to do that successfully, and see a long-term vision for how that supports community and economic development. And so what we do is bring folks together to look at the bigger picture of everything that is happening in the community, and how immigrants are interacting in all of the different places and spaces in our region to see where are we seeing challenges. And we do a lot of work to engage the immigrant community itself in telling us, where are the pressure points for them? What is going well? Where are places where they're continuing to experience challenges? And then, what do they see as what's going to make it easier for them to be able to be as successful as they want to be and contribute in the ways that they want to contribute to this community, because it is also theirs. And then with all of the partners that we bring together, across more than 60 different organizations in this region, how do we do things differently together to support moving forward on what we know our challenges to be? And so every organization is in its own way doing its own things to support immigration and immigrants in our community. And what we focus on as a partnership are, what are the pieces that we are doing around what any one organization or business is doing to support the broader success of the community? And how are we working together on pieces that are better served when multiple groups are working together? And so a lot of that is around engaging with systems leaders around, those things that consistently create challenges for people that we can't just change in our everyday practice in and of ourselves. We are doing advocacy. We are bringing groups together among our partners and beyond where, those relationships would make sense because there's a solution to a problem there. We are a catalyst for change in many different ways. And a lot of that is just through leveraging the connections and the capacities that do exist within this community to help people do the things that they want to do, to make the changes that they want to make in their own space through the connection to others.
Yeah, maybe that's a good place to bring Ernest into the discussion. I mean, we know that the intersection of immigrants and business, and that's the role that the working group plays, is connecting immigrants and newcomers with jobs in the private sector primarily, because we know that that's an incredibly important part. And having volunteers or community members like you, Ernest, who kind of lived experience, immigrant yourself, but also are on the employment side and talk about finding those career opportunities. We know in the chamber world, it doesn't have to be COVID, because we've been talking about this as long as I've been on the immigration partnership, and Ryan before it, that all that new employment is probably already here now. We don't have enough people in Canada that we know that we need immigrants to fill the jobs that are here right now and that will happen in the future to grow our economy. And so immigration becomes not only the right thing to do, but there's a economic imperative in making sure that we welcome and settle newcomers to this community, but then also get them connected to business. So Ernest, I guess the question is, if we accept that there is an economic driver to immigration, what does that mean for Waterloo Region? Like, what are the things that make us unique, and why this is a place that immigrants gravitate towards?
Thanks. Before I jump into talking about immigration as an economic driver, I just want to give 4 important points about Waterloo. Waterloo is one of the top urban innovation zones in North America. And we have a high concentration of information technology firms, scientific research and development activities, and engineering expertise. 2, it also has one of the highest concentration of university students among urban centers across Canada. Waterloo has the fastest growth rate of urban centers across the country. Between 2010 and 2019, the population grew by 15%. And the 4th one is that is the most successful urban centers in Canada as measured by economic and population growth and the number of new jobs that are created in Waterloo. So we hold, it's an important technology and innovation hub, and immigrants do play a lot of roles. I have 7 points that I want to talk regarding how immigrants play with will help with the economy of Waterloo. One is that we contribute to the economy and we create jobs for Canadians. We know that the strength of any country's economy, especially Canada, and for that matter, Waterloo, is measured in part by the labor force, where people pay taxes to fund public services such as health. And Canada labor force will continue to grow because of immigration. The second one is that according to the 2020 report by Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, there are a lot of people that are retiring. There's a significant increase in the number of people retiring, and many more are set to retire in the future. And Canadians are living longer, which is good. Health is helping, so Canadians are living longer. And the aging population, the pool of getting staff for the aging population is now a challenge. And immigration is the only way that you can now get to fill that gap that is being created. There are a few statistics that I'll talk. Some of them is about Canada in general, but it applies to Waterloo. According to Statistics Canada annual labor force survey, 20% of people living in Waterloo are over the age of 55. In 2016 census, it was reported that more than 30% of farmers and people in management, scientific and technical consulting firms are over the age of 55. And at least 25% of the workforces in accounting, transportation, warehouse, fabrication of metals are also over the age of 55. There is a growing number, over 60,000 people in the workforce who are heading towards retirement in the next decade. That is an increase of 35% in the last 5 years. On the flip side, looking at those under the age of 55, the number increased by only 1%. How do we fill the gap? It's only immigration, trying to get immigrants into Waterloo that will be able to fill the gap. The second thing too is that because the birth rate in Canada is low, there is a decline. Because of the decline in the birth rate in Canada, there's creating a gap between the pool where we can get people into the workforce. In 1980, for instance, 6 workers were working for 1 retiree. In 2015, 4 workers were working for 1 retiree. It is projected that by 2030, when about 5 million Canadians are set to retire, 3 workers will be working for 1 retiree. In order to supply to the retirees for them to live the way they are living now, Canadians definitely have to pay higher taxes. And to avoid that, immigration is the only way that can help resolve that gap. The other thing too is that immigrants can replenish the labor force due to shortage in skilled workers. The region is already facing a significant shortfall in terms of workforce, because according to the 2020 news that was released by the Ontario government, and I quote, on any given day, there are more than 18,000 vacant jobs in the Kitchener-Waterloo-Barrie region. And in 2018 survey of construction firms in Waterloo, about 68% of them indicated that they are in short of skilled workers. How do we bridge this gap then? Immigration will definitely continue to be the forefront of our future economic sustainability. And we know that according to the Government of Canada Express Entry Program, a lot of skills, specific skills are being, is a criteria that they are using, and it includes software engineers and designers, information system analysts, computer programmers, financial auditors and accountants, advertising and marketing. These are the skills that they are using to bring into the country. And Waterloo should be looking into the area of attracting such people into our region. The other thing is that immigrants definitely boost trade. A lot of immigrants are entrepreneurs. They create jobs for Canadians. Immigrant-owned businesses improve trade ties. And because they already have ties with their countries, they can import, export, and put Canada on give us a variety of import in this region. The other thing too is that immigrants definitely boost our local economy. We contribute to our local economy by spending money on goods, housing, transportation. Statistics show that if you take 1,000 new immigrant families, on the average, they generate about 90 million worth of new household expenditure, and most of them are spent locally. They will spend about 21 million per year on housing, such as mortgage payment and utility payment and property tax, and about 13 million each year on transportation, buying cars, maintenance of their cars, and about 9 million on food, which are usually in the local groceries and restaurants. And finally, they generate about 25 million worth of taxes, which are paid either to the provincial government, the federal, and the local government. Definitely, immigration sustained Canada's economy, and for that matter, Waterloo. We can look at international students. International education, for example, is an essential pillar of Canada's long-term competitiveness. According to 2019 Global Affairs, international students contribute about 21 billion to the economy, the Canadian economy, every year through student spending and tuition. The interesting thing here is that spending amount to more than Canada's export of auto parts, lumber, and aircraft. Students from abroad who study in Canada expose Canadians also to the culture and ideas which stimulate innovation, development, which is important to our culture. Now, let's look at the future. Let's say 2030, how will Waterloo look like in 2035? Are we going to continue to be strong, have a strong pipeline of workers for the future to ensure that the region can meet the workforce demand and take advantage of growth opportunities and important industries? Will there be the benefit of new generation of entrepreneurs to replace those who are retiring? And also, will the region continue to be the North American technology and innovation hub? The good thing that I would say here is that, yes, we can. And that is if we focus on creating an atmosphere where we can get a lot of immigrants into our region, because immigration would definitely be the forefront of the future of the economic sustainability for Waterloo region.
So I think Ernest, that's really important, and I think that what we need to understand is Canada is a country of immigrants, always has been, and I think this is just a new phase that it's coming from all around the world. But I think you hit the nail on the head. There are jobs open, and I hear about this every day. And it's not just COVID. It was for several years before COVID. We were the stat that you're right. On any given day, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs, and it's not just in those digital or tech. They're right across the board. Trades. There are all manner of jobs. Like in anything you can think of, there are job openings. And that requires, for economic growth, to make sure those jobs are filled. And I think, you also rightfully point out, I think there's this misnomer. Many immigrants are entrepreneurs. They're creating their own business and creating jobs, not just looking for a job. They're creating jobs. They're investing in the community. And we are very blessed. I think this is the other part. You obviously are connected with University of Waterloo and the university side, but we're also blessed to have Conestoga College, which that continuous learning and that evolution of a continuous, or not improvement, but a continuous education that people need in the modern economy. But Tara, I wanted to kind of go to, this is something we often will talk about. Nora Whittington does a fantastic job with the work pillar and I've worked closely with her. I don't know, it just feels like a million years, but I think for 12 years I've worked with Nora. And one of the things we always struggle with is to look and say, how do we make this the case to specifically small and medium-sized businesses? Because that's where some of the greatest need is for talent. and they're not quite sure how to do it or what the challenges are. But what does a business need to know about immigration and immigrants in Waterloo region? Like what are, it's just so imperative that they understand that Ernest points out that if you're going to fill the jobs that you got available, it's more not likely that you're going to be dealing with somebody that or looking to fill that job with someone who's new to the community and quite likely an immigrant or a refugee.
Mm.
So I have a lot of different thoughts, and oh my gosh, Ernest, that was a real education. I'm going to talk a little bit to some of, I think Ernest did an amazing job of overlaying like the big picture of immigration in Canada. I'm going to speak a little bit more to what immigration specifically in Waterloo region looks like, so that the members of our business community here can better understand that and think about what that means in relation to their organization and, whether that's like from a labor force or, business audience perspective, what that means. And then I can talk a little bit after that as to, if small businesses, small and medium businesses in particular, are looking to get to, the immigrant talent pool in the region, where are some of the places in the community that they can start to look in order to do that? Mm-hmm. And so, just in follow up to some of the information that Ernest shared, I think it's clear, migration is an inherent and everyday feature of our community. Immigrants are, throughout Waterloo region, as consumers, as business owners and employers, they are a source of talent for business. They are students in our schools, and they are members of the community. New people arrive in Waterloo region every day. Even during the pandemic, immigration has continued to go forward, and many people in Waterloo region are immigrants. At the last census, which took place in 2016, that we have the data for, we're really excited for the new census to see how this has changed in the last 5 years. So in 2016, immigrants were around 22% of the population. So that was around 120,000 people just in this region who have an immigration background. That's people who have a permanent status in Canada. So a fairly significant portion of the population, when you're thinking about your business and the environment that you're operating in, the potential talent pool available to you, immigration is everywhere in our region, and this is growing. Federal policy has been shifting since 2014, 2015 to intentionally grow immigration levels year on year in Canada. So when we look at the federal targets, in 2015, the federal government wanted to bring about between 260 and 285,000 new permanent residents into Canada. The targets for 2022 are 411,000. So that's a pretty significant growth in terms of, and that's people who will go through, kind of disperse across the country. But a pretty large growth in what those annual targets look like, about 44% growth. We see the data in Waterloo region shows that we here in this region are experiencing a corresponding growth when it comes to our own annual immigration levels, when the arrival of new permanent residents. In 2014, 2015, there was somewhere around 3,000 new permanent residents arriving each year in the region. Last year in 2021, we saw around 7,000. So quite a significant jump over that same 5-year period. And that is just when we look at the number of people who are arriving in the region as a permanent resident. Ernest was speaking earlier to our international student population. So these are people who are in the community on a temporary permit. We have on temporary permits in the community, people who have both study and work permits. And when we look at that population in our region, the change is huge. When we last gathered data for the region in 2018, there were almost 35,000 people in the region on a work or study permit in that year. And that had grown from just about 5,000 people in a year 6 years earlier. And so that is explosive growth over a 5-year period. And if we put those two numbers together, 35,000 plus now around 7,000, we're looking at about 40,000 new people coming into the community each year. And those people who are on a temporary permit are not necessarily permanently in our community, but they are a permanent feature. That is every year, a growing number. Last we looked, around 35,000 people in the community who are already in work or studying and looking for work. And so a really significant population that businesses can be tapping into. So we see that immigrants are growing as a segment of the population in the region and in our labor force, and they're a major driver now of population growth in the community in general. The data also shows us, when we look at it, that where immigrants come from has changed over time, meaning that we are increasingly diverse as a community when it comes to the languages of people in the region, the religions that they follow, the racial groups that are in the region. Our diversity is changing, and we see this filtering into workplaces, and it is changing how we operate in society and in our workplaces. And so for the business community, as you're looking to attract potentially more diverse sources of talent and look to immigration as a potential place where you may be finding new people to enter into your workforce, it's something that we're trying to work with businesses to really think about, what does this mean in the context of my business? When we look at statistics on the immigrant population, immigrants that come to Canada tend to be very highly educated, much more likely than those of us born in Canada to have post-secondary or higher degrees. They come motivated to study and work. Consistently, work and study are the number one drivers of immigration into this region. So they're looking for places. Immigrants are looking for places to contribute their talents in business if they're not starting their own businesses. That temporary population that we were speaking about, which has grown so much in size, most of them want to stay here. More than 60% when we ask are looking to stay permanently in our community, and their employment while they're on a temporary status is a way that makes it much more likely that they will be able to stay permanently. So giving employment opportunities and creating space for international students and people on temporary work permits will help in the short term to address labor force needs, and is also a way of plugging in the long term people into the labor force in the community. And, the population for the region, when we look at the region's population targets, they're looking at growing to over 900,000 people in this region sometime within the next 30 years. Quite a lot of that new population is going to have an immigration background. And so if it's not already a strategy for business, it really should be, to figure out how to attract immigrants into the business and how to create space for a more diverse workforce. And
it's not a quick, the population growth is all going to be immigration. All the net new is going to be immigrants. So, and I think one of the things, Tara, that it strikes me is and it's not really credit, but I think we don't recognize as a community that we are a very diverse community already, and that we're increasingly moving that way. I mean, my daughters are a little older, but I still remember volunteering in elementary school all the way through over the last even 12 years of time I've been at the chamber. The face in schools is where you can see the changing face in the community, is that they are a mosaic of everyone that across the region, even in the schools that high schools and other things. But Tracy, I think this kind of dovetails the importance for why is the immigration partnership of value to the business community? I think it's that context of saying, this isn't going to be, maybe it happens, it's going to happen. How do we use the partnership to make sure or bring value to the business community to make that newcomers to the community and the workforce of the future are the same people? How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think maybe just a little personal story as I sort of ventured into the immigration partnership a number of years ago, I came in as a member of the Deloitte organization, so a business organization that was looking to both be a good community member, but also to sort of crack that nut of, how do we leverage immigration and immigrants as part of a talent pool for an organization that was constantly looking to grow and build sort of the best talent that they could. And as I evolved, I remember sitting around that table, sort of hearing the council members who were, as Tara has described, a diverse group of people representing social services, people representing government, people representing, as I did, business. Ian, yourself as the chamber, really focusing on that small to mid-sized business entity, and how did we ultimately sort of solve for this gap between we have business here, but we don't necessarily have a way always to sort of draw them into our organizations. We don't quite know, in some cases, how to do it. In other cases, we don't know how to manage what might be language barriers. And in other cases, the immigrants themselves don't know where to go to find those jobs. So we've talked about things like employment hubs, ultimately either partnering with organizations that are looking to draw immigrants and providing them resources to do so, and giving our immigrant population a place to point their energy and their effort to then go out and find the avenues through which they're going to sort of solve that employment problem. We host networking events where we can partner with any of your small to mid-sized business chamber members or larger organizations to bring newcomers, to bring immigrants together with business to sort of have conversation, literally, around, hey, this is the stuff that I have to bring to your jobs, and you've got the stuff of an organization looking to recruit people. So let's marry those two things through a job fair. So that's one of the things the Immigration Partnership does on a fairly regular basis. If there's an employer out there who isn't sure where to go, I want to hire somebody from, I need people, so I need to hire somebody from another place. Can you help me do that? I would say, you don't know the answer to that question, call the Immigration Partnership, and the Immigration Partnership will help direct you to a place where that might well happen for you. There are programs through Conestoga College that give us internships, so we can match immigrants. Conestoga College matches immigrants with jobs through internship programs. There are recruiting organizations who ultimately help employers match with what might be the skilled individuals who can fulfill those jobs and are quite comfortable with incoming newcomer populations. So just to name a few, Conestoga College actually has a career center. The region of Waterloo has supports. Lutherwood has supports. The Working Center has supports. Agilec has support. So these are just a few, but we can help make those connections for you. We can be a connector. We can be a connector for the community. And the YMCA has language skill development services as well. So there are some employers who have brought newcomers in who perhaps needed to bolster their language skills, so their English speaking language skills. And in that case, maybe a recruitment agency supported them, or the Conestoga College internship supported them in getting the folks. The Y then in partnership supported them in helping develop those language skills over time as well. So there are a number of resources that we can help point you to that can ultimately sort of solve for this problem. Ian, I think we feel that there is a gap, and we wouldn't exist if we didn't think that we thought there was still work for us to do. It would be lovely if we could just go away, right? That we solve this problem. It's it's all good. But economic development brings organizations, draws, attracts organizations into our community. That gap is that there isn't sort of that connectedness then to the talent pool that includes our newcomers and immigrants. And so this is a gap that we continue to look to fill. And there are a number of resources out there that, again, we can help point people to. The personal story I want to share is, as a business person, I sat around the table and I heard of much good work happening to both settle, help people work and belong in the community. And ultimately, as a business person, I want all of those things to be true when I hire someone. I want them to be settled. I want them to feel belonging, and I want them, ultimately, I'm going to employ them. When we had a large influx of Syrian refugees a number of years ago, and I sat at that time on the council itself, sometimes we sit around these tables, many of us have been on boards, we sit around these tables and we think, are we doing enough? You know, is this really serving the purpose, this collection of really smart people? And when the Syrian refugee influx happened, the community didn't quite know what to do. We had very many people who wanted to give and give lots. They wanted to give money, they wanted to give resources, they wanted to give time, they wanted to give clothing, they wanted to give dental care, they wanted to give language training services. And that was when I really saw the power of the immigration partnership and all of its connectedness across the community, and mobilizing and trying to figure out a place for all of this money and all of this wonderful stuff that the community wanted to do happened within, I want to say, days. Maybe it was a week. Contracts were signed. Community Foundation was on board. The region of Waterloo became the bank. The immigration partnership had a process through which application could be made for things that people needed, the Syrian refugees that were present and here. And language skills development was a huge part of what we funded there. These people are now 3-4 years later still in the community, and they had a significant amount of language skills training. So again, this was something seeded by, supported by, and mobilized through a number of community partners, but the immigration partnership leveraged its, the strength of community, the strength of all of its connected players to make that happen. And as a business person, that was when I went, right, we can make things happen on a dime. This isn't about a slow moving boat. This is the power of a collection of people that can make things happen.
Once again, I'm doing a horrible job of managing our time because we're going to go hurtling through. There's so much to cover. So we got about 15 minutes left. I got 2 or 3 more questions, but I think, Tracy, some of what you talked about, and I think just in the chat box, Nora Whittington has reminded us, and this is really important for the employers that either are watching live or will watch this on our website or when it gets sent out through social media, that the employers should know that they can promote any job postings they have, and the immigration partnership through its partners will make sure that this is available through the network. And we work very closely with those organizations for both immigrants and refugees. So that's nwhittington@regionofwaterloo.ca. And we recognize that, and she does, that there are lots of challenges in every sector right now, one of which is English language. Sometimes that's if they don't have English language training at the right level, can I hire them? There are those supports available already in the community, and certainly Nora and Tara and can help that facilitation as well. I'm gonna bypass Tara. I want to go to Ernest, and we got, I guess we got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to keep you on the clock. If I start doing this, it's time to wrap up your answers so we can get through it. But Ernest, you're an immigrant to Canada, but you're leading here in Waterloo region now. Maybe just a few of your insights to share about the experience of immigrants coming to work to workplaces in the region here, and what do businesses like what does that business that's going to hire, what do they need to pay attention to in terms of make sure you're attracting in the first place, but understanding cultural and some of those issues, as well as what does it take to retain the immigrant or the newcomer to our community. I think that's really important that there are some differences there. They're not unmanageable, but what's your perspective? You've lived that experience. Why don't you give us a few thoughts on that?
I'll do that for the sake of time, and I'll just give you 5 points of my personal experience, and then we will look at what businesses can do to help that. The first one is that definitely immigrants we are having a great impact on our community. I'm a typical example. I work at the cancer center. I volunteer at the community center, and I work with a lot of at the community center. For instance, I was the program coordinator, designing programs for ages newborn to old age. So there's a whole spectrum. I interview, and I was getting interview people that we call volunteers, but we pay them for that. And so we definitely do have great impacts on the community. In the health sector alone, data shows that 1 out of every 4 healthcare sectors are immigrants. So we are definitely having a great impact in the community. Secondly, as immigrants and even from personal experience, I know we are enriching our social fabric and we are promoting diversity. I remember when I first moved into Kitchener-Waterloo in 2006, the school that my daughter was in was, we had I think she was only Black in that school, but now you go back into these schools and you see a spectrum of diversity of people in there, which is really a beautiful thing to look into. And again, we are very active in the community. Data indicates that 1/3 of immigrants volunteer, and a lot of immigrants, and I know a lot of people who are immigrants that are volunteering in various sectors in the Waterloo region. And on that, again, we are really helping. You've made mention of it before. Immigrants in Kitchener-Waterloo are helping the economy. When I came here in 2006, there were few immigrant shops, but right now there are a lot of them that are opening up. You can go and buy local foods, which is very good. So we are definitely helping grow the local economy. And because we are doing a lot in the community, what can businesses do to help us? I have only one main thing. Businesses in the first place should employ current immigrants that are in the system. And after that, they should create an environment that embraces diversity, inclusion, so that those that have been employed can tell the news to those that are coming, so that people will know that Kitchener-Waterloo is a place that I can easily move into, because the atmosphere there welcomes each and every one. We should definitely put aside all forms of racism and any form of phobia and create an environment that is very, very welcoming for immigrants. There is definitely a relationship here. I'm a physicist, so I like relationship. There is a direct relationship between economic growth and provincial and local government capacity to provide high quality public service and public infrastructure, such as roads, schools, and hospitals. A growing economy and population in Waterloo region could lead to a greater public investment in services and infrastructure. And we can do that if we create an environment that welcomes each and every one, irrespective of your race, irrespective of the skin color, irrespective of where you come from, that we have an atmosphere in the Kitchener-Waterloo area that everybody is welcome.
Okay, we're down to our last 6 minutes. So I'm putting Tara and Tracy on the clock here. But I think just building on what Ernest talked about, Tara, just in a couple of minutes, the settling and belonging elements of the immigration partnership are very much linked to what Ernest just talked about. Like you can't get someone who's ready to be employed and that you can get the most out of, and they have a good experience if they're not settled and don't have that sense of belonging in the first place, which are sort of the foundational pieces. Maybe talk about those chunks and why they're important or what they mean to business as well.
Sure, and I'll try to be fast. I think Ernest actually spoke to a lot of what I would say to here. Settling and belonging are like the two pillars around the working piece of what we do. And they are ideas that I think hold relevance to the broader work that we are doing in the community and in business. When we are talking about this, it spans elements that incorporate anything that relates to the experience of somebody when they are moving into and living in a new community or a country outside of work and employment, and seeking to build capacity to be a community or a workplace that is more welcoming, inclusive, a place where everyone can thrive, no matter who they are or where they came from. When we talk about the work that we're doing under the Settle umbrella, it relates to things like getting to know the community, being able to orient our systems and get through, housing and education and our healthcare system, et cetera, making sure that we're looking at things like affordability of programs, services, housing, accessibility, and the impacts of things like racism and discrimination in the community. When we are talking about the work that we're doing through our belonging pillar, we're really looking at the bigger picture of what does it look like to walk into this community as a newcomer? Are you welcomed? Are you able to find your place here? Are you included? How do we address isolation and social connectedness for newcomers and others in the community? And again, themes of racism and discrimination are going through this work. And I think that these are all concepts that are equally relevant in the workplace. And I think that we see more and more employers looking at employees in their whole being, not just their ability to perform a specific task in the workplace, but their whole person that contributes to their resilience, how that is impacted by the workplace or the community in our case, and how they in turn impact the community and or the workplace. And so as we're working through this, we're looking at how do we build community capacity in the, in for-profit settings, in nonprofit settings, in public and private, by bringing people together, by acknowledging that there are concerns in the community and talking about those openly and addressing them. In a business setting, we often hear, concerns about language abilities. Do people speak English well enough? How's the fit going to be with, the culture of our company? There are solutions to all of those problems, and they're not even problems, right? It's a risk that employer may be taking. So, we look at how do we bring together organizations that are doing really amazing work in this community to help address what can be seen to be a barrier, so that we can break those down, because in the end, we have watched many employers really embrace a really diverse workforce, very different than it has been in the past. And through that lens of, how do we help people settle and belong, which means grow together, do things differently.
Okay, I'm giving the last 94 seconds to Tracy. So you use it wisely, but I guess the real thumbnail would be what's the elevator pitch of resources available through the immigration partnership or the organizations within the region that businesses that want to seek to employ newcomers, there's a few things that they should do where they can get started and can get some direction.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we've touched on a number of the answers, Ian, even in the conversation that we've just had. I think at a very minimal level, I would say if you don't know where to go next, if you have a job posting or you need a resource and you don't know where to put it because you would like to potentially attract a newcomer, an immigrant, a skilled individual, then please contact us through either Tara, the staff of the Immigration Partnership, or as we heard earlier, Nora Whittington, and Nora put her contact information here, and we will help connect you to those places where those postings can go. You want to know more about internship programs, contact Conestoga College or contact us, and we will help you sort of make those connections. You want to speak to an employer who's done this, who has been successful with it. Sometimes we just want to know, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. How do I do it? Well, we will help you make those connections. And it's not just the tech sector, so don't get that wrong. PJ Wallbank Manufacturing Company, Veld Architects, small organization, Teledyne also, yes, a larger tech organization, Canadian Thread All. I remember a long time ago, Jim Estel speaking, I believe it was representing Danby at the time, a great leader in bringing in a large complement of newcomers and immigrants. So we'll connect you with those employers who have done this and actually have succeeded at it. And I think one final thought also is we often are talking about attraction. Retention is a challenge in this market. People have options, they have jobs, it's a buyer's market if you're an employee. Newcomers are often, and I'm not going to stereotype entirely, but newcomers are often so thankful for their first opportunity in Canada. I've got personal stories of people that I've hired who literally have advanced in the organization, have since gotten an MBA, who are leading as directors in the organizations that they started at the very lower level at, and are so appreciative. Same organization, so appreciative, have given of themselves, and every year thank me for that first opportunity. And I always remind them that it had nothing to do with me. Their success is their success. But for those people that give them a leg up, it makes a difference. So I encourage you from a retention perspective to consider newcomers from a hiring perspective.
All right, I've successfully burned right through the 2 o'clock finish, so I will wrap it up there. I want to thank Tracy and Ernest and Tara for joining us today. That does bring us to the end of today's session. Thank you again to our title sponsor of the series, Manulife. Our platinum sponsor, of course, is the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region. And finally, to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, we do host a new business success series every Wednesday. Next week, join us. I'm joined by my colleague, Greg DeRocher. He's the president and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. And we're joined by Nina Gupta, partner at Gowling WLG, as we discuss Bill 27, the Working for Workers Act. On December 2nd, the Ontario government introduced significant changes to the Employment Standards Act. And we want to know, do you know how to implement the right to disconnect in your workplace or help and deal with the prohibition on non-competes? But all important issues, particularly as Tracy said, in a tight labor market. Join us for a practical session regarding these changes and impacts on your business. We hope to see you then. For full details and to register, visit greaterkwchamber.com. Please do share this series with you and your friends and colleagues. Join us every Wednesday afternoon for another edition of the Business Success Series. Because if it's Wednesday, it's the Business Success Series. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.